Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming on this beautiful day. I hope that everybody got outside since it's been so rainy lately. Um, I've been told that those who want to participate in the raffle have done so. If you haven't, the basket is still in the back of the room and you'll have a little while until we draw. But I'm going to go ahead and get started on the presentation. And you have an agenda, a program there, so you can follow along and see what to expect, what's coming and what's next. We're going to end the presentations after I've gone and the guest speaker and my staff. We're going to have a panel discussion, and after that panel discussion is when we're going to do the Q&A. So you can hold your questions until the end, and if you want to jot them down on the back, there's some lines on the back of your program, or you can jot them down so you don't forget. We're going to try to get through the presentations first before we take questions and comments. So thank you. All right, well, I've done the welcome. I see some new faces here, which is really exciting, and some familiar faces, which is equally as exciting because some of you I only get to see once here at this exact event. So I'm very happy to see you and connect with you in person, even though we might email or text. So I'm just going to go over quickly because there are some new faces and there might be some who watch the video recording of this later. Just a background about C-10. Since 1991, C-10 has been around watching out for the public and the environment. Our primary program is radiation monitoring, so we provide that service to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and we operate 20 radiation monitoring sites throughout us, Seacoast, New Hampshire, and North Shore, Mass. We also participate in public outreach and education activities, so you'll see us in community events. I'm going to remind you a couple of times through this presentation, upcoming events that we have in hopes that you'll come or spread the word to others. And then very active lately in research and advocacy with decision makers because the times that we are living in now call for that. So what used to be maybe, I would say 20% of my day has doing these advocacy activities has now become the majority of my day, my week, my month. Is keeping up with the things that are happening politically and getting in touch with our leaders at every level of government to make sure that the priority is us, the human beings, not necessarily a corporation. I want to give a shout out to my board of directors and my advisory board members, many of whom are here, the staff, and we also are grateful for relationships with businesses who either let us host a probe on their business or their home, or donate food or other items. So jump right in. The end of this session, before I jump into some nitty-gritty details about C-10's work, is the perfunctory task of nominating and electing the C-10 Board of Directors officers. So, what I have here for nominations, if I can get a motion from a board member to make these nominations. Okay, Pat Skibby for Carrie Boyd for Vice President, Marielle Kiefer for Treasurer, and Kim Claggett for Clerk. These are all incumbents. I heard a motion. Do I have a second on these nominations? Thank you, Tom. Okay, all in favor of accepting these nominations for these officers, please say aye. Any opposed? Passes. So welcome, please, our officers for another term. They are very dedicated, and I couldn't do anything without them. So thank you for that. Now that's over. And I'll jump right into the exciting work that C-10 has been doing this year. Can you hear me if I don't lean into the microphone? No. I might have to step down a bit. Tom, our guest speaker later, is tall enough that you'll be able to see him, but I might have to step down. For community outreach and education, like I said, you'll see us out at community fairs, but we also try to put written statements out into the public. Some of our board members write excellent op-eds that you can see in the daily news to keep abreast of things. We write newsletters that we send out via email and mail out to homes. And we're also trying to work with the public health agents in each town to try to increase the number of households that are accessing the free radiological emergency planning supplies that are available if you live close to a nuclear plant like we do. Those include potassium iodide pills, which are particularly important for families with young children. And we've actually have seen an increase in the adoption rates of potassium iodide pills since we started making those relationships and inviting those health agents to dispense pills directly at community fairs. In some cases, we've dispensed in one community fair the same amount that a town had done in an entire year prior. So it's really making a difference, and we're going to continue to try to do that as much as we can. We also offer internship programs with mostly Newburyport High School students, but we do advertise to all of the local high schools, and we are trying to make inroads into local colleges and universities as well. We recently had an excellent intern, Elsie, and she did a lot of data analysis. But we touch on all different disciplines: marketing, physics, computer science. Sometimes you can even get in the field and take soil samples, which is what we're going to do this summer with one of our interns. So this slide is identical to last year, and it's not because I'm lazy, it's because it's all still very relevant. So these are 4 executive orders that came out in May of 2025, and responding to these and researching these falls under that advocacy program that I mentioned earlier. So it used to be maybe 10%, quarter of my day, and now it's the vast majority of my day. Things are moving very quickly because a lot of resources have been delegated on the federal level. So lots of staff members in federal agencies are working on changing rules that used to protect us to some degree. And if you had asked C-10 2 years ago, before these came out, we would have said, make the rules stricter. And so now what we're fighting for is to keep them at the baseline, is to just keep them at status quo if we can. And to do this, we don't just interact with federal leaders and regulators. We, again, are sending descriptions, briefs of these issues to the mayors, to the fire chiefs, to the state legislators, because it's going to take a coordinated effort kind of at all levels to respond to when these things hit home. So by the numbers, I've testified in public hearings, well, public meetings, probably it's probably over a dozen times at this point. The topics range from radiation safety to what information is going to be reported now in public documents. So we used to get some amount of transparency in the quarterly reports that came out of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But now those inspectors, instead of being able to write what they think is important, instead of them being able to write what they think I want to know as a member of the public, they now have to follow really strict boilerplate templates that are going to be restrictive and are going to be less transparent. So we are working really closely with the resident inspectors for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, those that are writing these reports for Seabrook Station, and they are telling us that they are requesting variances from their leadership and management so that they can put more information beyond the boilerplates, that they can access discretion. So these changes just went into effect in May. So the first report we're going to see will be in a couple months, and that's where I and the research team, which is a committee within C-10, will be looking very closely to see if we've noticed a difference in the amount of transparent information and kind of hold those staff members to their promises. We submitted a pretty critical about 4-page letter to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on what we suspect will be a relaxation on radiation protection standards. And that's going to be for workers who work in the plants, but also us, the public. And it's not just going to be for new reactors. It will affect existing reactors like Seabrook Station. And while that's happening, of course, we are reading news about Harvard working through their research, identifying possible trends in increased disease rates and proximity to Seabrook Station. So we are working really hard with them to try to get more information so that when we're submitting comments to the NRC, we are armed with evidence. We're not armed with conjecture, We're not being irrational or emotional. We are using health data to back up our concerns. We have been meeting with the Nextira site vice president for Seabrook Station. His name's Dave. He says I can text him anytime, so I haven't taken him up on it yet, but I might, depending on how these rules get published on the radiation limits. Because he promised me that there would be no changes, so we'll see. But that happens every July, so I'm hoping this July will be my third meeting with Dave, and I'll share with him my honest feedback as I have been doing. And then I also went to DC in March and attended the annual NRC conference, which is mostly like a trade show. It's mostly industry people connecting with the regulators in hallways, you know, not in formal settings. But I had some pretty critical meetings over coffee with NRC staff so I could get maybe more details than I was able to get over the phone or over email. And I was pretty pleased to hear that every NRC staff member that I talked to does not like what's going on. They're not happy about the changes. They had, I think, a lot of pride in the philosophy that they existed as a regulator to keep people safe. And that is the mission that they had been embodying their entire career. And they see this sea change coming in and kind of disrupting that. So that gives me a lot of optimism because political winds have changed the world, of course. And it's those people that are going to still be there. If they can manage to not get fired, then they might be there, you know, when hopefully there is a return to sanity. And so some of those people are like rewriting some of these regulations, and I feel, you know, good knowing that there are some good people that are in there, you know, fighting for us. And it helps when we as a community elevate our voice so that they feel supported. Because we elevate our voice, we get the senators involved, Senator Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, and then they feel supported by Congress to make these sort of bold and objective statements in their workplace when maybe that's not being encouraged right now. So thank you all for coming because you're a piece of this right now just by being here and by supporting us and supporting C-10. And I can't move on from the slide without giving my advisory board even more props because I go to them a lot with questions about how to decipher some of this stuff, especially the technical stuff. So what's something that we're watching forever be the concrete cancer issue at the plant. And so I know if you might have seen this in the letter I sent or the emails I've sent, but it's something that's going to be in place forever. It's irreversible. And so C-10 is going to continue to watch very closely how the owners of Seabrook Station manage this concrete problem. And if that diverges from what the best available science says you should be doing, we're going to be launching legal challenges until forever. So one such challenge will be coming this July, and as a result of a multi-year effort. So just count on us to continue. We're not dropping this issue, and we're going to be following it in perpetuity. So this is a segue into the topic that we kind of wanted to highlight today, which is everybody's hearing a lot about new nuclear and the nuclear renaissance, and is more nuclear going to be coming to Seabrook Station or to Massachusetts or New Hampshire? And so I put in what I view as rumors versus the reality on this topic. And I'm going to admit that I do spend some time on Facebook and I do read the comments section. And this is where it's how I kind of take the pulse of how the majority of the community feels when somebody posts something about new reactors coming to Seabrook. So these are some of the rumors I've heard, which is, or ideas. We could just put a new reactor in the second containment dome that was never used. Or we could just build a new small reactor next to the one that's there. And you can plug it into all of the existing infrastructure. Or we can add a new reactor really, really quickly, and that would be good because my electricity costs are really high, and so I want my prices to go down now, and so it seems like this nuclear stuff can happen quickly and help me with that. So the reality is that none of those things are quite true. And I think that C-10 has the task of trying to help all members of our community, not necessarily those like you that are pretty plugged in, but the everyday average person. How can they kind of move away from the misconceptions and readily find sort of the reality, which is, well, the second dome was like partially dismantled a long time ago. And before that, like you can see in this picture, it was called like an eyesore. I think people made jokes about like plants growing out of it. It's like a potted plant or something. So it's been partially dismantled. The effluent tunnels, like the steel tunnels that would have brought water into the reactor and out, those were excavated and sold for scrap metal by next year when they bought the plant. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's not there. So any new nuclear that comes to Seabrook is going to have pretty big hurdles, as though it's a new site, really, because it's a new reactor with new requirements, and it's going to be years, like decades, before we see a shovel hit a ground. So I just wanted to kind of set that tone that this is not something that's happening tomorrow. And next year's own CEO is kind of not sold on, the SMR, small modular reactor frenzy. So we'll see what happens. The only plausible thing that I've heard, which you could call a rumor, is that Google has been taking some meetings in New Hampshire to possibly put a data center at Seabrook and co-locate it with a new small modular reactor. So that's like the most mature conversation about new nuclear, because companies like NextEra, they want that like built-in customer. So we'll see. Data centers are famously unpopular. So we'll see how that goes. These are more rumors and realities. I'm going to distribute this after the fact for everyone to read, so I won't run through all of them. But I wanted to highlight that the governors from Mass and New Hampshire did publish a statement that they're inviting new nuclear. But again, all of these barriers exist for a reason. You have to have a lot of siting reviews, and hopefully there's a robust community engagement process that would also be part of that timeline. And I want to be realistic. This is what the New Hampshire Department of Energy actually submitted to the US Department of Energy, saying this is what we're interested in if we were going to do anything with new nuclear. They are very uninterested in hosting waste. And they are very uninterested in reprocessing fuel or hosting fuel, supply chain, anything. The only thing they're interested in is federal dollars to pay for new reactors, because what state wouldn't want free new energy? So this presentation is kind of competing with lots of applications from other states who are a lot more willing to host some of that dirty stuff. So it's unlikely that New Hampshire is going to be receiving federal dollars to fast track any new reactors at Seabrook. I just wanted to share these headlines. I mean, we've had two pretty high profile situations happen in New Hampshire where people were consulted on the siting of some major infrastructure. So the ICE facility in Merrimack, New Hampshire, the public response was very quick. There was a data center proposed in Nottingham, New Hampshire. It went from proposed to withdrawn, I think, in like a week, because the response was so swift and so strong. So even though we might feel like there's a bit of apathy happening in our communities and people, might be getting a little, unplugged or overwhelmed, I see these responses as like really excellent litmus tests for how well communities will come together if something tangible is actually put on the table. And so I just wanted to highlight, like, what are the truly independent experts saying about small modular reactors? And these are excerpts from an interview with an ABC journalist and Allison McFarland. She's a former chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. She's a geologist as well. So why expand nuclear? Why now? And there is the idea that it's carbon-free electricity compared to coal or gas. Of course, if you look at the whole supply chain, there's some carbon emissions there. But that's why. That's a talking point about why people support it. And then here's an example of the most recent place where we tried to build a new nuclear reactor. Well, it was 7 years late and $20 billion over budget. So that's what you can expect. You should use history to inform the future. And that cost was borne by the citizens. And what are they and how viable are they? They're really just small versions of the existing fission reactors. my guest speakers coming up know a lot more about the technology than I do. But they're being defined by only generating this small amount of electricity, but you can put 10 in one spot. So even though each one only creates a little bit, the idea is that there are these little boxes that you can kind of make a bunch of them in one area if you wish. And then this is harkens back to this co-location of data centers with nuclear plants, and it's sort of President Trump's vision, or at least those who are working with him, is we can get nuclear stimulated and going if you can also tie it to this data center boom. So those two things are sort of bubbling up, you might say. But like I said, communities are very disinterested in data centers. And then how much nuclear waste do we already have that we haven't figured out where to put it? So again, the public sentiment is pretty low on accepting energy utilities that are going to produce more waste that doesn't have a home. And so the journalist trying to be balanced was like, why might we be hopeful? Because your answers haven't been that hopeful so far. And Alison McFarlane, she's pretty clear. Nuclear power, like any energy, like any utility, it lives or dies by the economics. So if it's going to be outrageously expensive and it's going to have this long-term cost of storing the waste for 100,000 years, you're going to have to hold that up against the other cheap renewable energies that are already here. So they're going to have that hill to climb, and we'll see what they do.